everyone, and welcome to the September 2012 edition of VolunteerMatch Solutions Best Practice Network webinar series. I'm Casey Brennan from VolunteerMatch and will be moderating our session today. I'm really excited to bring together two of my favorite CSR thought leaders to discuss the convergence of cause marketing and corporate social responsibility, or CSR. Craig Bida is the Executive Vice President of Communications and leads the cause branding and nonprofit marketing practices, where he works with companies and nonprofits to help them drive their business objectives while also addressing societal needs. Dave Stangis is Vice President of Public Affairs and Corporate Responsibility at Campbell Soup Company, and in addition to that is also the President of the Campbell Soup Foundation. Both Dave and Craig bring more than 20 years each of experience and lots of wisdom to our discussion today, so we're really excited to have them on the line. So both of these professionals have experience in both cause marketing and CSR and have witnessed sort of the convergence that's taken place over the last several years where these terms have sort of become interchangeable. So they'll both share some of their observations and experiences with us today, and then we'll leave much of our time for more of a discussion between Craig and David. So for any of you who have questions, you can pose them in two different ways for both Craig and Dave, either by typing it into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, or by sending us your questions via Twitter using the hashtag VMBPN to @VM_solutions. So I'm going to pose a few questions for discussion, and then we'll get to your questions as well and get to as many of those as we can. So without further delay, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Craig to kick us off. Welcome, Craig.
Hi, terrific to be here. Let me just get my screen up and we'll be ready to go. All right, I think we're all set. Thanks so much, Casey, for kicking things off. And Dave, really excited for the discussion. And for those of you listening, really eager to engage via the tool here to answer your questions and have as much of a discussion as we possibly can. Casey pointed out a really viable point that there is a convergence that has been happening. And I'll get more into the details, but I think it's really important to understand that cause marketing, as it's specifically defined around engaging products and consumers and trying to drive the power of purchase to drive causes, is really not just a one-off, and it's becoming very, very clear that it often is an avenue to deeper commitment by companies, and that it's about really trying to understand what your different stakeholder expectations are, both inside the company and out, and thinking about cause marketing as a potentially a terrific way or a very solid pillar of a broader platform of engagement that has broader, what we typically would define as CSR. So we'll get more into that in the middle of the deck, but it's really about a continuum and thinking about how do you start and then how do you develop and grow. And I think Dave will pick up that theme as we get further along. So as I share a little bit of data here, this is from last year, late last year, just about a year ago. It's really important to understand that there is what we're calling a groundswell of interest in social responsibility, in the idea that companies and nonprofits need to partner to make the world a better place, and that's specifically that about 80% of consumers globally, and this is across big countries and small, rich and poor, there is an expectation among consumers that companies need to do more than just make money or to just make small investments in their community. And the data in their communities in which they operate, the data that you see on the screen talks about how there's really just 6% of people left that think companies are just about meeting the shareholder objectives and making money. The 13% are saying just a limited role, don't get too involved, stay focused on making your widgets, doing whatever it is you do. But then a really broad circle of consumer appetite and really expectations around deep involvement, supporting issues with donations and time, supporting issues and advocating for change, so having companies take a stand on important issues. And then 30%, a full 30% saying companies need to change the way they operate to align with the needs of society and the environment that is around them. So really an important watershed in terms of the majority of consumers globally thinking and expecting and really holding brands accountable, and companies, the people that work in companies, holding companies accountable to taking action. This happens, more context for this discussion that we'll get into around how do these two things fit together. This happens in an environment in which trust is declining. It really is at one of its lowest points. If you have been tracking this or if you look at the data over the years, that we're down now to only about 2%, 20% of Americans, 2 in 10, that have a positive perception of corporate reputation. And then you can see a kind of a confirmatory number there that over 90% of the public wants to see companies involved in helping solve problems our nation and other nations around the globe face. And what's really interesting is we dug into the data for the global research last year and found that consumers really have a view that companies, in fact, are better equipped and more capable, more able of addressing issues than governments, than nonprofits on their own. And so there is really a unique view towards corporations, both as very not trusted, as agents that need to be poked or prodded or have expectations set for them or kind of brought towards the light in terms of the reputation that they have, but as being the most powerful, perhaps, agent of change. So therein lies the opportunity for companies and for nonprofits who partner with them in authentic ways. There is a terrific opportunity to drive trust, to establish authentic programs that really show tangible outcomes and impact on communities, and that really is an avenue for gaining consumer support and trust. The next slide gives a little bit of a picture of how this has not always been the case. If you look at the 3 data points there, today where you have this 80 to 90% people saying cause marketing in the way I defined it up front, engaging product and services in the sale and the consumption of them, linking them directly to cause or issue. It was just 66% of people back in 1993. So that means, depending if you're glass half full or glass half empty, that there were about a third of people, over a third, who at that time, now this is fewer than 20 years ago, who thought that there should be separation, church and state, that nonprofits, people working on issues should work on the issues, and companies should sell their things, and that the two should never meet. And as we can see, and many of you know, this is the lives that each of you lead, that has dramatically reversed. So it has been in a generation that this change has occurred, and certainly some of the indicators from younger people and younger generations are even higher than the average population samples to say this really matters. And it's not just a nice to have anymore, it's something that is really a requirement. The other data, many of you know, that this impacts the way that people see companies. It impacts the way they think about them. It impacts the way that they see them as potential employers, as potential brands that they're going to support, and across the range as investment choices, really across the range of ways that companies interact with consumers. And then clearly, when you put a choice in front of a consumer, what would you prefer? A brand that's associated with a cause that's doing good in the world, or one that's not? All consideration points around price and product performance being equal, certainly a no-brainer. But even for a growing segment of the population, price and performance not being equal, there is a growing sense of companies need to do things I'm going to support through the choices I make, through the dollars that I invest, brands, companies that are making the world a better place. And we hear this in the words of moms and consumer households around the world saying, I'm the CFO of my household. I'm going to make the choices with my money to benefit my community, my family, and things that matter to me in the world. So the next slide is about how should companies respond, and this will be, I think, a lot of what Dave will get into as he gives some very specific examples of how Campbell's is responding. But what we hear from the C-suite, from business leaders, from marketers and public relations experts and community relations experts and the CSR teams is that it really does feel like a bit of a pile-on at times, and I've heard companies describe it as something like a sporting event where everyone's jumping on top of you, where every one of your stakeholders now is pointing and pushing and pulling. CEO recently described it as there's a ring of spears, there's nowhere to run, and so there really is closing in through procurement, through business partnerships, through employees who are sending emails to CEOs saying, why are we doing this, why are we doing that, to just general consumer expectations that there is a need to respond. And sitting on the sidelines is no longer acceptable. About 80% of consumers say, tell me where you are on your journey. Don't tell me you're perfect. I won't believe you. My life's not perfect. But tell me where you are, tell me where you're going, and then take me along with you on that. So a couple solutions, very high level. The first thing, and this is a model adopted from the Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship, really is about putting it at the core. So deeply integrating social impact into your business operations, into products and services, and you can see the overlap, and into social engagement and cause. And at the very, very heart is of the brand, of the enterprise, what are the values, what are the mission, principle, policies, all the things, the choices, the strategic decisions that are being made. And what this slide really represents is what many of you heard many times before, that it's about integrating cause and social impact into the heart of the business, into the heart of business strategy, and then using that as a source of competitive advantage growth and to make your company and your brands more sustainable to withstand change and the evolution in the marketplace over time. So if there's one thing you take from this slide, it's at the core, at the heart, and many of you on the call, I'm sure, are involved in doing this. The next thing I would say is about what I call unlocking a cycle of change. And what we often find is that there is this process that companies and brands go through. And the first kind of broad thing is about understanding, this know thyself mantra, which says figure out, and the question is in the bottom of the slide, like, what do you care about uniquely as a team, as a brand, as a company? What are the issues that are important to you, both as individuals and then in terms of what the brand represents and stands for? And I'll give you an example in a minute. So if you think about that, what do you care about? I'm trying to keep this very simple. And then frankly, what are you good at? What do you know how to do as a business, as a brand? You move then around the circle into action. So you start to then look around and say, what are the assets that you have? And they're not just money. They're not just finances. They're not just check writing. That age of philanthropy is largely over. It's a much more nuanced spectrum, as many of you know. So what are the assets in terms of time, intelligence? There have been some great examples recently. Walmart's efforts against hunger have not just marshaled huge financial resources against that issue, but are mobilizing the expertise of their supply chain experts, some of the strongest in the world, to try to address issues in the food pantry, in the system in which the food, much of which gets wasted or spoiled as a result of just supply chain and logistics issues. So it's bringing all of the assets that you have to bear to problems. And then really defining as part of that, what will you uniquely do? There are many issues. There are many companies taking on issues. Something in the neighborhood of 80% of Fortune 250 companies have some sort of a program, and it expands throughout the range of smaller companies as well. So what is it that you uniquely are going to take on and then uniquely solve? And then certainly in this day and age, more important than ever, measurement. How will you measure success? How will you determine from both an economic and a social value creation lens if the program has been successful, and what are the results and the return that you're driving for the enterprise? Because increasingly, as we've said, as this becomes a core business strategy, it becomes less immune, in fact, to the forces of business measurement and the need to justify the impact that it's having. And there are many examples, and we can give them. I would cite the example of Pampers in terms of, as I said up front, having what you care about, what you're good at, what you know, in terms of the One Pack, One Vaccine program, where they lined up the brand values and what the brand is all about, fostering babies' development, and have found a partner and are now acting in ways that really drive what the brand means, and its social impact and its economic proposition are tied together in a very robust, airtight program that really communicates to consumers what the brand is all about. So really some simple questions here and a rather simple cycle, and worth thinking about in your own organizations. Where are you on this circle? Where are the barriers, the invisible lines, the things that get in the way, and how can you define a path like this moving forward as you seek to develop or evolve your programming? The next slide gives a sense of the range, and I suspect we may have some questions on this range. This attempts to simplify the level of depth and the level of resource investment that you can make across programs. And so if you think on the left about marketing, there's no value judgment against these. There is called a level of complexity and investment that is linked to the desired impact that you want to have. And so many companies will start in one place and flow to the other, and that's really, I think, what we'll end up speaking about, I hope, today a lot, is the convergence and the way that these things interrelate. But if you work across from left to right, you can give many examples of simple cause marketing efforts that are, call it, detached from a broader CSR effort, that are linked to very specific business objectives in time, and that often come and go, that aren't lasting or built into a campaign. What we see then next to that are what we call signature programs. So these are programs that are stood up over time, that the company really links their brand to and begins to really try to associate and develop specific executions again, so that in the consumer's mind that the enterprise or the brand is very strongly associated and linked to a signature program that really defines a lasting commitment. And within that, there certainly can be executions that are more akin to cause marketing on the left-hand side of the spectrum. Moving across, we're getting more complex and more bolted into the whole infrastructure of the enterprise at this point. A program like Live, Learn, and Thrive, a cause platform designed to help the company. This is a program Cohen had worked on a number of years ago, designed to help the company deal with the complexity of working with a stable, literally hundreds of brands in different geographies all around the world. And how do you create a system that allows you to leverage scale of having the connection points between and among all those brands, but to still allow for differentiation, allow for brands to self-select or to be guided to very specific pillars that are more related to the specific aspects of what the brand does. So this column is much more relevant to those of you who are involved with a portfolio of brands or who are working across, call it with global scale in different geographies where the brands may activate and come to life in different ways. And then on the right-hand side is a program, and there's many words sort of floating around about this: shared value, shared responsibility. Xylem Watermark is a program that Cohen has developed for Xylem. It used to be known as ITT partly. It was a global company that really, the Xylem part of the company spun off Pure Play Water, so very 100% focused on water conservation use of effective management of water around the water cycle, and a program that is all about that is now really, we're looking to help them support employee engagement programs, to drive innovation, and to really position the company as a thought leader and help them get access to new markets, and really, on top of all of that, really drive home that they are a company focused on water in all of its needs and all of its solutions and bringing a full range of solutions to it. So you can see as we go from left to right, there is an opportunity to invest more deeply, to bring more resources to bear, and to tie more tightly the social commitments that the company makes to the business strategy and to the way that the business actually goes to market. So at this point, we would love to get some feedback from you. Are there barriers to success that you've experienced? And Casey can jump in if there's logistics on how to exactly do that. Can you all see the screen? Casey, can people see the screen? This is about finding what barriers are there. And if you could jump in and tell us, and we'd love to respond in real time to you around what are the things that get in the way? Money, budget, is it lack of senior level support, too scattered, not unfocused, is one side talking to the other or not? Or do you live in a happy place where none of this stuff occurs? We would love to get a sense of how this works in your worlds.
Great, and so I'll just give everyone a few more seconds to submit their responses to this question about if you've experienced barriers in your work about developing and executing your programs. 5 more seconds here, and then I'll show everyone the results.
Terrific.
And there you go, Craig. We should see the results now.
Okay.
So really interesting here. It looks like lack of focus is a problem for about 1/3 of people on the line. So really kind of figuring out, as you said, Craig, about kind of what is it that works best for your organization and how do you do it in a way, maybe like that P&G example, which is like many different brands. How do you kind of bring it all together and focus it in a way that makes sense for the organization?
Great. Casey, I'm not sure I'm showing the results, so maybe you could walk folks through it. It's not working from this end. Are there other results that you could share, or do you think that people are seeing them now?
Sure. I think people on the line should be able to see them, but if not, I'll just talk through really quickly. It looks like 18% see money and budget as a problem, 24% see senior level support as a barrier, 30% is a lack of focus, 24% is lack of internal alignment, and then 3% on the line feel like they don't actually have any barriers and that they, as you said, get to live in sort of that perfect world, which is great.
We should find those people and get them on the next webinar so they can tell us exactly how that works. But it's terrific to see the results in the way that they are, and rest assured that you have many others in the space addressing those issues and challenges. And I think that as we get into the discussion, perhaps we'll address some of those. Certainly, the lack of resources has become really a flashpoint for many companies and organizations in the tough economic times that we're in. And so finding ways to be more innovative, finding ways to drive more efficiency and scale, finding ways to really use tools that are less costly and leverage social media more effectively to try to drive continued ongoing discussion and engagement around programs. There's lots of ways to really attack that. Great. Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts there. Just one last slide, and then I will turn it over to my colleague Dave, there really is a very important message to send around communicating not only your commitment but also your impact. And I like to describe what I call a say-do ratio. And this should square up to 1. And what that means is that there are many companies that are on the left saying a lot more than they're doing. And so they're actually creating risk for themselves. And in most cases are typically found out in the social media 24/7 world in which we live. And so you never want to get ahead of yourself and not talk more than you're doing. Make sure that there's substance, because consumers will very much vote with their dollars, and stakeholders, key stakeholders who are looking and really watching. Remember, 20% of people trust corporate reputation, so finding ways to meet that sort of concern in a way that you don't want to do is a real risk factor. The other side of the equation is just as important, and this, I would say, is actually more chronic. I think that people have gotten the idea that greenwashing, that leaning too far forward is risky and not good behavior, and we actually are seeing less of that. But what I'm seeing more of, unfortunately, is people that are doing a lot of things but aren't talking about it. They aren't talking about it either effectively, or they're diminishing their efforts. And the reasons there's multiple reasons, and some of them are fairly common. People say, look, we're not quite perfect yet, so we don't want to go out and tell people about stuff until it's quite perfect. So we're going to get it perfect, and then we'll tell people. Others say we don't want to beat our chest. We don't want to be perceived as using this. We do this for our own reasons. We act because it's the right thing to do. And what I tell both of those voices is that you're missing consumer expectations. You're failing the needs of your stakeholders, that people want to know what you're doing. They expect it of companies. And if they don't hear it from you, or they can't find it, or it's not easy for them, they actually may assume quite the opposite, that you're not doing anything, and therefore head elsewhere, because people are making more and more decisions around what they do, who they support, and how they go about that based on these values and social impact. So it's really worth thinking about as the fourth pillar of how to evolve in this marketplace, is to really think about, are you talking enough? Are you doing enough? And how is that matching up in the marketplace to help build your brand and drive the success and the sustainability of your enterprise moving forward? So with that, I will hand over the reins to Dave. So let me do that right now.
All right, Dave, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Craig. A really good kind of overview of all of the different angles involved in building the case, some great data, a lot of different pieces of information there that I think all companies are struggling with. I know we are, and I am, as I'm trying to build a strategy and a set of executions here. So my plan is to share a little bit of a short, but some granular examples of the struggles and the opportunities, some of the successes, and what I think is needed, number one, and some of the things we're trying to put in place here to get us down that road, and hopefully leave plenty of time for questions. So as I start to move through my slides, there's a couple pieces just to give you some framework. What I'm going to do is kind of back into this conversation a little bit. I don't know exactly who's online, but I assume we have a mix of both, what I might call CSR practitioners and the marketing side, the cause side, and then maybe another population of folks kind of at the intersection of those things. On the left of this slide are key messages that we use across this company that are on our walls, that are stated by our CEO, that we use to drive performance inside the company. And there's a little bit of I would say, cause in there. You can see it around innovation and consumers, but it's much more about business on the left-hand side. Drive long-term profitable growth, create a high-performance organization. The logos on the right, I mean, it's just amazing to me how many different kind of, as I went to look, if I just sat at my desk and thought of cause campaigns, I might come up with 2 or 3. But I think if we really look hard, if we're a branded company, and those of you that are on the line that come from branded companies, and really think about where causes have intersected your employees, your behaviors, your businesses, advertising, community relationships, that list gets very long. There's some great examples, I think, on this slide. I'm not going to talk about them here, but there's also some that didn't work out very well, and I'll explain why in some of those cases. What I'm trying to do is to build a model and a strategy and a culture and a whole system of tools and processes that are ingrained in this company's culture over time, where cause and corporate responsibility don't even have to be thought of. They're just a way that the company acts and a set of tools that the company uses to improve its business and leverage everything it does. I'm trying to build a CSR and a cause strategy that's tied to our mission, tied to the way we communicate externally and internally and motivate people around what we call our success model, and there's a bunch of other tools we have as well. And the CSR strategy really kind of pulls from our strength and then takes that to whoever our audience happens to be, whether that's a consumer, an investor, or an employee, executives, peer companies. And my goal is to really make cause kind of go away as a word and a separate, let's sit down and think about what cause we're going to support this quarter or this year, into, what are we trying to change? Just like Craig said, what are the few unique, differentiated models out there? Where can we take the strengths of our company that is unique to Campbell, not just in the food business, but kind of around the world, line them up with the needs of society, the desires of our consumers, and really create a signature or a fingerprint of where we play in that space. And that's my goal, and that's what I've been trying to work on and bring forward to the company. We set some long-term CSR Destination Goals. I'll wait for the fire truck. Those aren't my fire trucks. They must be somebody else's. I'll wait for them to pass. We set some long-term CSR Destination Goals to create the culture and drive the change inside the company. So these are more focused on our behavior and how we operate and act, and give us the proof points and give us the story that we can then bring to market. And without getting into a bunch of detail, there are primary pillars around this concept of nourishing and what we bring to our consumers with choices of healthy products, what we bring to our communities, and this is a little bit more important in this context because we are trying to measure some health improvement based on what we bring from a physical activity, nutrition, education, access to good food, this kind of food web focused on health and hunger and childhood obesity in ways that we can actually measure it in a defined population. So it's different than other kind of cause campaigns where it's not a to-market campaign of world hunger or global something yet. It's really targeted geographically to a manufacturing aspect of taking out half of our environmental footprint of our products, and then closing that all up by how can we get every single employee engaged in what we're doing and leverage that engagement to drive better performance. There are some sub-goals on the right-hand side that are more, like I said, focused internally, that are building the case. This may go to Craig's do point versus say, but what change can we drive? Where can we get comfortable in this space? This is being a good company isn't new to Campbell, but being a good company in a very public and focused way is somewhat new. This slide is really not for you to read and in the granular level detail. What I wanted to show here, though, is we actually went through an exercise a couple years ago where we tried to, this is just a partial piece of that work, we actually tried to map out some of the causes that we had engaged in at our different brands and locations on the left, and tried to figure out where we were investing our efforts across the top. There's also some of these kind of gray numbers and inputs that are really hard to read are some of the investments we've made. We actually tried to do a full-blown return on investment analysis of our cause-related marketing. And some of these are very focused in terms of health and vitality and wellness and nutrition, and others are just kind of scattered around. There's some that we did at the corporate level, some that we did at the site level, others that we did with a brand level. Some of these were home runs. Some of them you might look at and think, I get what that cause is about, but I don't understand the way it fits with Campbell. It was a great exercise. It really forced us to step back, and all of these things take resources and investment both in time and effort and money. And there's an opportunity cost with everyone, because if you do one, you have to pass up the opportunity to do another. So there were lots of opportunities and lots of different causes, and it's time kind of for one of our other polling questions. If you thought hard, if you really did take a good look inside your company and you gave it some good thought, how many cause activities does your organization currently support or have? And then I'll turn it over to Casey to run the actual poll.
Sure, it should be on everyone who dialed in as a participant screen right now, so if you could just submit your answer, and then we'll take a look, kind of all of us as a group, where we kind of lie on the spectrum. I think as we saw on Dave's last slide, Campbell has undertaken several over the years, and I think on his first slide we noticed that there are a lot of campaigns that are underway, but how many cause activities does your organization currently have that you can maybe even just think of? So I'm going to just give a few more seconds, and then I'll show all of us the results. And here are the responses now. So actually, it looks like a majority of the people on the call have 5 or more. 62% of us have 5 or more cause activities that our organization is currently taken on. So maybe a little bit of a surprise, but also, I think all of us, when we talked about barriers, those barriers such as focus and alignment that we saw on the poll that Craig showed us, often that can be even more difficult the more programs that you have underway. Great.
Yeah, in my mind, I think that if you think hard, coming up with more than 5 isn't a surprise to me. Coming in working in corporate America, I think it's a challenge, because if you really think about what you're doing all over the world, if you're a global company, at all of your sites, what you might be doing from a volunteer standpoint, a foundation standpoint, those are all opportunities. I view them as all assets that we can put to good work for society and good work for our company. And if they're spread all over the world, they're kind of mismanaged assets. Even if they're more than 5 or 10 or 20, if they're focused in 1 or 2 key areas, it lets you ladder up a story and ladder up an engagement relationship with your consumers and your customers.
And Dave, just to jump in, I think you nailed it. Your company and you particularly are thinking about how to put those things together, to line them up in some way, at least cluster them, right, so that you're getting some aggregate benefit from all of those little activations, or big or small, whatever they are, acting together. And I think that is the challenge for probably many who have multiple executions and multiple stuff, to really make sure that it actually builds the brand overall in relevant context, whether it's in a country or geography or globally. And so it would be really terrific, perhaps as we get into here, how you're thinking about trying to do that, harness all of those efforts towards that common goal of standing for something in particular.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I don't think anybody's really there yet, but we're trying to make some progress. But that's a good segue into this next slide. Hopefully you can see this one, that in my work in trying to define some best practices, and I've tried to look at a lot of different companies and a lot of different examples out there, and we get tons of consumer insights data and customer insights data. So we work a lot with a lot of the retailers around the world, especially the food and beverage retailers. Just some things that, again, these are not written in stone. These are not out of some book. These are kind of thoughts of mine as I pulled this together. But principles around the platform itself. How do you build these things? Clearly, you want to be able to connect it to your company's mission. That's the first test. If it's not intuitive, it doesn't make sense, I think you need to go back to the drawing board. You really do want to think about what the consumer, I think we're so close to these causes and so close to our companies that oftentimes we don't really work hard at trying to understand what the consumer is going to think of, or whoever the audience is. What is their insight? What's their desire? And there's some characteristics that are changing every day that inform some of that. We wanted our platforms, I believe, to be broad, welcoming in this case, but and kind of out there where people feel like they can become into the cause. We have brands that range from Pace and Pepperidge Farm, Prego, and V8, and Swanson, and Arnott's. We want our brands to feel like they can come in, but it can't be so general that nobody understands what we stand for. This next bullet, this consistency piece, is something that I think is critical, and this I'll get to a little bit in my next slide, but marketing in general. I mean, it's just the term and the way it's applied and the way it's used in business. These are cyclical things for most companies. They are campaigns, and cause and CSR are not campaigns. So they compete on this longevity cycle of, whatever Campbell stands for, as long as I'm here in the CSR space, is going to be the same. It's not going to be, bouncing around, but oftentimes marketing campaigns do that. It's a certain season or a cycle. It's a one-year time frame, and that just takes away from the stickiness of the campaign. And I think if you create it in a way that allows your executive team, the other communicators in your company to be comfortable, use it, and leverage it, it reinforces the overall platform. From the cause areas, we touched a little bit on this. It's this overlap of where I have the ability to make the biggest impact as my company, and what are the critical needs in society, and how does that tie to my business. It's not a hard exercise. You kind of lay it out on a matrix and map them out. And the fewer the number of causes, the better. And I don't mean relationships. I mean the cause. What needle in society are you trying to move? It can cover, I think, if you think about this from a business perspective, and it's probably different in food and beverage maybe than in technology or apparel or something else. But if it can cover the risks, it can address the business risks. If agriculture, if you're a food company and you're concerned about resource availability and climate and water impacts on food around the world, that can be part of your cause. It can be a risk part of it can be a risk strategy as well as a good citizenship strategy. So it's another way to think about it. And then there are a bunch of different parts that I think we talk about inside my company, and I'm sure are available at other companies, but we can align this to volunteer work. We can align it to employee programming inside the company. We can align it to recognition programs. If you have a corporate foundation, your foundation can be aligned in certain ways, and this all goes up to tell a stronger and better story. And then just to close, a couple points, I think, as I'm trying to build a better process here, I think for the longest time, it was CSR versus cause marketing, right? I mean, the cause marketing people were out, spending the money, doing the advertising campaigns. The CSR people were, doing the work. They were operational inside the business. They really didn't talk much. They didn't communicate much. They didn't even know who each other were, really. If you had somebody working in the CSR space, they might not know who the chief marketing officer was. And for sure, the marketing group wasn't reaching down to the community group and asking for advice on how to do marketing. There's another version of this that Craig touched on as well, and that's CSR as cause marketing. That's kind of the say and no do, right? Where the entire kind of CSR platform of a company is their cause marketing, which is probably not bad on its own. It's just, I think, fairly weak and doesn't lend itself to, longevity, culture change, metrics and targets, and changing behavior. I think where most companies are, the way they're organized, the way they're executing, CSR can inform and help lead and give tools and direction to cause marketing. Our marketing people now are coming to us for ideas when they come up with a new angle, a new brand execution. Early in the process, they pick up the phone and they ask to meet, and we talk about what kind of big pillars I'm trying to bring up the company and to my market, and they're able to leverage it. And if they can leverage what I'm doing, I'm able to leverage what they're doing, and it's this 1 + 1 = 4 story. We've created a strategic communications council here that meets once a week, and it includes myself. It includes our corporate communications group. It includes our advertising group. It also includes our investor relations. It's a single person, right? The VPs or directors from these groups. Investor relations, governmental affairs, CEO office, and consumer insights. So not only can we deal with tactical issues that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, we're able to take a look at advertising campaigns in advance. We're able to take a look at reputational issues, both from a positive and negative side, policy-making decisions, communications that go out to investors, that go out to CSR stakeholders, that go to public policymakers, and make sure they're all consistent. We're also building a much more active partnership with integrated marketing, and this is a term we use, this integrated marketing piece. these two words apply mostly to our kind of corporate cause marketing program. So the long-term programs like Stamp Out Hunger, Labels for Education, Address Your Heart, which were broader than a single brand at Campbell. Now we've built kind of a one-to-one relationship. So when we reinvent or restage some of these major programs, we get to be involved and they come to us for advice. We worked really hard last year on last year's Stamp Out Hunger program from both an execution point, leveraging CSR stakeholders, social media to try to really raise awareness. It's hard work though, especially in a multi-brand company. You know, the P&G example is a great example of where this is hard. Every one of these brands, Campbell's a smaller example, but they have built their own brand identity. There's not an immediate desire to kind of give that up to a corporate brand cause. So it's work in trying to build those relationships and break down those silos. And the other goal I have is to, anytime I can insert this kind of thinking and these kind of decisions into the actual business process, so that if you go to market with a cause campaign, you know, step one or step two is how do you align and leverage the CSR equities into the business process? Then it happens automatically. It doesn't rely on me. It doesn't rely on my friend over in integrated marketing. It's just the way the company does that execution. So that's my long-term goal. And I think this is my last slide, and it's just some characteristics that we know work. And other companies know they work too. This is not, again, rocket science, but I do think we forget some of these things. Persistence and continuity. I think the biggest challenge between cause marketing in its traditional or older definition and what we're trying to bring it to is the length of time of some of these campaigns. The reason people have a perception of a certain company is because of advertising, and it's because of the long-term example of it. We had a great campaign a couple years ago called Make Every Serving Count. It was about V8 and getting your vegetable servings, and it was getting fresh vegetables and produce into underserved communities, and every time you bought a V8, it helped get vegetables and produce into these communities and families. It was a great cause campaign. We had partnerships that worked, that made sense. Everybody got it, and it was for one season. And the next season, they moved on to something else. We moved on to something else, and that campaign just died. It died online. It died inside the company. Another one that was we had a lot of traction with was one with urban gardens and kind of growing and bringing our expertise into local gardens and teaching kids where their food came from. And another, I thought, great campaign, a lot of great feedback, but it was a one-year cycle. The next year, Kraft picked it up and did a great job with it, and nobody will remember Campbell did urban gardens 3 years from now. So that's one example. The other is with social media, with all of the different ways that you can engage, especially in a food and beverage company, there's two things that I think we can leverage more than we do, and one is action. One is actually engaging the consumer or the customer in the cause itself, whether that goes down to the third bullet and giving them a choice, a kind of a choice model of what they support and what they do and where they do it. But food and beverages can play on senses, and all, you can pick up a container, you can act in the community, you can touch and feel and sense, some cases even taste, that I'll get to in a second. Anytime that we can rely on these things, it helps. The little picture down in the bottom right is a project we just finished a couple weeks ago, and it's still kind of in market today. This was I wouldn't even call it a cause program, but we can use it to inform our work going forward. It's called Just Peach. It's a peach salsa that we actually made here in our Campbell pilot plant in New Jersey. There's hundreds of thousands of pounds of peaches that just get plowed under, buried under in the landfills. The farms have to pay to have them disposed because they're not these big, beautiful peaches that you can buy at Wegmans or Safeway. People just don't buy them. The farmers were losing the money. It was a bad environmental story. The food bank can only carry so many perishable items before they have to get rid of them. And we were able to basically take this perishable item and turn it into turns out to be great tasting, shelf-stable product. We had to contribute a little bit of money, but a lot more in terms of expertise effort. Chefs created the recipe. We had our lawyers involved to deal with the formula and the labeling. We basically made this, and the food bank can then sell it and generate a revenue stream, a more sustainable revenue stream. So this now is available in 21 outlets around here, and it's just a great story all the way around. It hits on every pillar I laid out: environment, community, marketplace, and our employees. So there's this concept of, being aligned, proximity, how close you can really make a difference, building in a reward and a recognition both for the consumer, but also the company. And I think that every consumer is looking for a little bit of gratitude. Even though they do it out of the goodness of their heart, they really would like a little thank you in there somewhere. Somewhere along the line, whether it's they are able to give something to their own little school in their community, their kids benefit, they get to tell the story. There's a little bit of recognition. These are all things that you can think about when you build a cause program that leverages, in the best sense of the word, CSR equities. And then the last question, I think, is just for us to discuss. Lots of stuff on here to touch on, lots of other examples to touch on. But I think the whole world of technology, gaming, behavior change, real local, depending on where you are in the world, societal change that you want to drive through a cause is all on the table for companies to take advantage of and tell that story. So Casey, I'll turn it back to you if you want to kind of open it up for questions. I'll let you drive from here. I think that's my last slide. And Craig and I will be happy to engage in a discussion.
Sure thing. Well, thank you both so much. We definitely do have some questions, so I want to get right into those and jump right in if you guys are okay with that. The first one, Dave, to some of the points that you were making about, your challenges with alignment between somebody who's managing the marketing budget versus somebody who's doing the operational implementation. This also came through from the audience as well, is really how do you create sort of that cultural alignment? What did it take for you guys to get to the point of having that strategic group that works together, that brings you all to the table to kind of create solutions for this? Do you have any advice for the rest of us who might not have achieved that yet?
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's hard and it takes time. So there's no kind of quick fix, and it's been a challenge throughout my career. There's always this kind of divide and difference. But I do think the more we can put our minds, our work, and our effort in sometimes the CSR side of the house has a little bit of a more focus on kind of we know what's right. Because of the stakeholders and the inputs we get. That may be true, but I still think we have to put our work, some of it, in the minds of the marketers and realize that they have an agenda that's a business agenda. They need things that they can use. They need things that they can turn on and off. They need them in some format that they're used to. And there's a lot of the stuff that companies do on the community side and the cause side that a marketer looks at and says, I just don't know what to do with it. I don't know. It's good. They support it. So it's sitting with them, understanding what they're trying to drive. Oftentimes, they are getting consumer insights or marketplace insights that you haven't had a chance, the CSR people haven't had a chance to see. And this is information you can ask for, you can get from somebody in your company. There's information informing the marketer's decision that most CSR people never see. And we need to see that. We need to be able to inform it, to judge it, and to give input on it, but we also need to see what information is informing our marketers' decisions. And I think that was the biggest kind of aha for me, that especially consumer products companies, they have tons of consumer insights data, tons of market research, and it's amazing what is in there and how much of the information kind of reinforces kind of old patterns. And it's up to us to try to break that. I mean, I don't care who. I mean, there might be marketers on the call and consumer insights person, but I can get the answer I want just by the way I ask the question. If I'm doing insights research, and we need to understand that so we can help our marketers understand kind of the biases that are embedded in that. It's really just trying to understand their point of view. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, Casey, just to jump in real fast, I would say I think, Dave, you're doing a couple things exactly right. The council that you set up, is a great example of creating a context for communication for these different groups to talk and to engage around issues. So we see companies successfully, people don't talk and their lives are different, but if there's joint alignment and senior level support for trying to address these issues of how to link the CSR focus and strategy to the brand portfolio, then having regular connect points, setting very specific objectives, it's a great way to do that. In a portfolio company, another thing that really works is healthy rivalry. So if brand X starts doing something, and then wait, brand Y, hey, wait, I've got to get on that too. And so I've seen that work very effectively. I worked for Procter & Gamble for a number of years and saw that work extremely well as brands began to realize that as leadership brands within the portfolio get behind stuff, that they also needed to get in line. And then I would say the final point is that employees have a desire to contribute and do the right thing. It's not like their day job of selling product X dominates their whole existence. We know about 70% of young employees today particularly are going to companies saying, hey, I want to work for a company where the values of the organization, of what the brands do, link up with mine, where there is impact. And so often there's a personal interest, and it's finding a way to help individuals and marketers link that personal interest into the marketing plans and the campaigns, and oftentimes that can create a context for a discussion as well. So a couple other points I've seen work across other organizations.
Yeah, great point.
And I want to kind of dovetail that with I'm going to kind of combine two questions that came through. Somebody is wondering sort of, how do you communicate successfully with customers or in a way that resonates with your customers when you take something on? And I want to layer in with that specifically, what kind of opportunities or challenges social media presents in that realm of communicating to customers.
Yeah, so this is Dave. You really have to start with them first, number one. I think it's not, again, it's not rocket science, but in even just the terminology, just so I can be clear to the people on this line, customers in my world are the retailers, right? The Walmarts, the Krogers, the Safeways, the Acme's. So what I can map out very easily, I can talk to them, figure out their priorities. What are they trying to drive in their local community? What are they trying to drive for their brand? I can map my best equities, my strongest programs to them, and then have a clean discussion with them on, all right, here's how we can help you advance your strategies and ours and reach the consumer. The consumer is another story, and I think this is where social media comes in, and I really do think that some companies are doing great work, but I think we're really just scratching the surface. There's so much opportunity. We have to stand for something. We have to stand for something long enough that a consumer kind of gets it and believes it, and it becomes an expectation. My goal is not to have to communicate and beat a consumer over the head with the Campbell message. They just know it. We have to do it long enough for them to just know it. If we change it every year, they're not going to remember. So I think that the consumer, if they can engage, if they can kind of partake and live and breathe whatever my cause is, that's my goal with them. The customers, I'm really looking to kind of optimize their programs and mine. They're really kind of overlapping their focus and mine.
Yeah, great points, Dave. I would just add that in terms of the question on communicating successfully with your consumer, I'll take it in that lens, and also in your partnership realm as well in terms of the retailers and customers. I think that people are looking for real impact today more than ever before. There is this me, my family, my community, my world, these concentric rings, and people think of those in different ways. And certainly with the recession that we've been going through, that those rings have sort of shrunk in as people are looking for more impact that's very relevant to my life. And so the rise of the one-to-one, the Warby Parkers and the Tom's Shoes, I think is indicative of a desire for consumers not to say, oh, I'm supporting this and the money's going somewhere doing something, that it's actually helping something in a very, very tangible way. And so I think that you can help your cause and help your communications be more effective by either communicating very clearly what the impact is going to be and or designing a program that makes it easy to communicate because you're actually having real discrete impact that people can quickly grasp at shelf or when they're getting messaging from you. The idea of social media as a barrier, I think that we live in a world in which there's so much of it now that it is important to stand out, and it is important to clearly let people know what you're doing as a brand and why, and really try to reinforce the relevance so it's not coming out of left field. What consumers tell us, what they kind of get behind are the things they can grasp easily and that really fit together as part of a value proposition for the brand and make them feel like they're really doing something important, and that drives preference and choice for the brand. So clarity of messaging and really clarity of strategic impact of whatever the program is designed to do.
So that kind of concept of alignment and it making immediate sense to the consumer leads me to another question that I love. Thank you for whoever submitted this question. Is how do you end or kill a cause program that might be popular with your consumers, but that just doesn't fit with who you are as a company or as a brand? Dave, I'm particularly interested if you've had to do this with any of those on your matrix of programs that you've had over the years. And again, it's maybe it's resonated with consumers, but it really just doesn't fit with your brand.
Yeah, well, there's two sides to it. For one, we've had programs inside the company that we thought really resonated with consumers, and sometimes they didn't, right? And sometimes we thought they were a sacred cow, and they really weren't. You got to be honest. First of all, the leaders inside the company have to be honest with themselves if you go down this path. There's, it always hurts to kind of back out or say no to somebody. But if you have a strategy, and you have a clear, just what Craig said, if you're focused on specific things you can measure, a clear impact in society, you line that up with what's important for your company, the biggest impact you can make, that screens out a lot of things, and I think it really gives you permission to take a hard look at some of this stuff. And I wouldn't say you want to kill the program that your consumers love overnight, if they really do love it, but you can restage it, you can reshape it, you can communicate to consumers, you can use consumer inputs and research to actually ask their advice about the way you reshape it. And there are a lot of tools out there, and it's not as hard, I don't think, as you think. Sometimes people think consumers love their only program. They love it for a reason, and there's probably something there, or you think they love it and they really don't love it as much as they do.
Yeah, terrific point, Dave. I love your idea of involving people in the process. I think that this is a difficult question for many companies, and a lot of evolving cause programs and CSR commitments does involve sunsetting specific programs. I think it would really be worth digging in to understand why they love it so much and who are these people. And there's probably a lot that could be learned from understanding that. But there are opportunities to take an existing program and perhaps embed it in a larger context, or make it maybe a pillar of a broader effort is one way to go at it. There are also ways that companies sort of keep some of the sacred cows. There are things that consumers love. There are also things that customers or partners love, or pet CEO projects. And there are ways that companies can perhaps use an 80-20 rule, where you might put 80% of your efforts behind a concentrated focused area, and that's what you talk about more, and that's what you communicate and use as the basis for your brand building aspect. And maybe there are things that you just won't be able to get out of quickly or even over time that you perhaps still support, but they become part of a different type of philanthropy for the brand. It's not as visible, it's not linked to what you're trying to drive in a very, very public way. So there's a lot there. And I would say, as Dave said, I think consumers are forgiving. If you're clear with them what you're doing and why you're doing it, they often will come along for the ride. The other argument I would make internally is there's probably an opportunity cost to what you're doing. Even if you stick with something that some people love that's not driving your brand, imagine if you actually created something that people loved and was driving your brand. You'd have a higher return on your investment. You'd have a higher efficiency rate. You'd actually be more successful. And so it would be worth holding up those two options, figuring out what would happen if everything in fact did line up, and then try to understand what the opportunity costs are, and then evolve over time, as David suggested, towards that more strategically linked situation.
That's a great point, and something that we at VolunteerMatch often guide our companies to do, which is sort of continue to assess, evolve, and adapt your program over time. I'm just going to jump forward just because we're almost out of time, and I want to make sure that you all know about what's coming up with our Best Practice Network webinars in October. I'm calling it Global October. First off, we are doing, on October 4th, we are doing a session with CDC Development Solutions and PepsiCor, all about kind of pro bono service on steroids, which is how they're dubbing international corporate volunteering. So it's all about getting, when companies are making the decision to send their employees abroad, they're going to share some kind of new research and a new toolkit that all of us can use to kind of jumpstart this. And again, there's a registration link here, and these will get sent out as well. Second, at the end of October, on October 30th, we're going to be joined by Lucy Shea from Futera And she's going to give us a sneak peek and an exclusive look, really, at their kind of anticipated new global study called Planet Brands. And really this study is looking at sort of, you know, the potential of companies to change, to positively influence consumer behavior to encourage more sustainable kind of lifestyle. And what's really interesting is that she's going to be kind of giving a call to action to organizations that may not be doing anything yet, but what is it that we can all learn from that? So we're really excited to be welcoming her to that session as well. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You know, Craig, Dave, thank you so much for your insight. There's so much more we could talk about, but unfortunately we only had an hour today. But thank you so much for your time and your key learnings and your honesty with us. We're really glad that you could lead us through this today. And to everyone on the line, thank you for joining, and we hope to see you again next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.